Hello, everyone. It is Wednesday, the 2nd of October, 2024. It's a new moon in Libra. And it's seen in some circles as the 10th month of the year /2. So you've got the 102, 201, 102, whatever. And so some people do like using codes and specific dates and gematria to push their propaganda and various events. And even I think it was P. Diddy that was just talking about it within the last, recently as well. Like some videos came out and just popped up on my stories just in the last few days, where he only recently had been talking about discovering things regarding numbers and dates, and that's something that he was not aware of at all until very recently. He had white hair in his beard when he was saying this. So again, this is very, very recent. And it's just stuff that I've been talking about for a while as well, just to predict what some groups will do. Anyway, I'm going on all these tangents already. I did not watch the vice presidential debate. Okay, I did not. I had every intention to, except yesterday was a really stuff to do with the house. And anyway, it's not that wasn't my priority. Although it is a priority, obviously, even though I'm Canadian, I'm in, I live in the world right now, and U.S. politics absolutely impacts international politics and countries. And so anyway, I wanted to share, I watched the first minute or so of it, and I stopped it to do a reaction video. And because Tim Walz already lied right off the gate, right out of the gate, I mean. And so I just want to share propaganda. Everyone knows what propaganda means, but I'm just going to reiterate. Information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view or war. He was charged with distributing enemy propaganda. I would put Walz in that group right now, because he is distributing enemy propaganda that's coming from people like Netanyahu, who is a liar, a propagandist, a lobbyist, a warmonger, and he has been lying, I will reiterate, to us for years, for decades, in order to get us involved in wars and to fund the wars that he wants to push, that he's not involved in. He's not on the front lines. He's like, come on. Anyway, so I just wanted to get that out of the way, because people still don't know what happened last year, October 7th of 2023, and I shared plenty of videos from the start to that, and even correcting people like Ben Shapiro, who were showing, he was also showing propaganda. What was alleged to be a dead burned, charred baby body was actually AI generated, and utilizing like a dog scene, a dog photo, and then turning it into a child, and that's something that I was one of the first, if not the first, to call that out. And then the casualty numbers, and then the IDF strikes on their own people. And then even hostages getting shot at is what I'm saying. And then people within Hamas wanting to, also trained and funded by Netanyahu and his warmongering friends and oil tycoon friends and people that are heads of the military, pharmaceutical, industrial complex, essentially are who are writing the scripts from all countries. And at the higher ups, they all get along, despite what people think. And the underground tunneling systems, that was a lie. And I even shared that Israel, that even Alexander the Great was talking about tunneling systems underneath of Israel and Palestine when he was allegedly alive, guys and girls. And Israel also said that they are admitted, like this is from decades ago, where they are the ones that built the tunneling systems underneath that hospitals and churches within Palestine as well. And then the propaganda with these calendars and these plans that were saying that were written by Hamas. This was clearly deciphered and shown to be false. Crisis actors that were used, pretending to be nurses and doctors and this and that. They were actors lying about this, like even within Israel, like they were actors, and this was all proven as well. And even putting plans within a book and saying like, oh, like look at the first page, like this is the plans from Hamas, like what, like and it's literally folded multiple times, vertically and horizontally, and stuck in the book. And tell me how many books have pages inside, okay, that are attached to the book where it's able to be folded vertically and horizontally multiple times. Guys and girls. Anyway, witness witness accounts too also share. They also say or state that again IDF was involved, shooting at the crowds, that they were and then hostages that were released. I've shared hostage accounts, actual real hostages that were released, and what they said, that the IDF and people were going in with a very hard knock approach, and they actually were the ones that were killing people that they were trying to rescue. And then claiming always because of the Hamas terrorists, we had to go in with a hard knock approach. And anyway, that's not how you do it. And what do you know? I was at Joint Task Force 2. This is a counter-terrorist unit, and I still work with them and speak to them on a regular basis. And so, as an infantry officer, so anyway, I know, and then saying that, like, even the hostages that were, as they were being released, they got shot at and killed by IDF soldiers. And then even witness and hostage accounts, people that were released saying that they saw that it was IDF that were shooting on the crowds and stuff like that. And that they were treated very kindly and very nicely by the people that were their hostage takers. And again, I even showed that when they infiltrated Israel, it was already open. There were people that were affiliated with CNN, with Reuters, with AP, with these other mainstream media outlets that were there filming. And anyways, I'll go on with the debate. But this guy, like, to not know this information, and he wants to be, first of all, I think he's a senator or a governor. Anyways, like, of the state that he just like friggin' like ran to the ground. So look at his resume before you vote for Tim Walz and Kamala, lying Harris as well. And I've got more information on her, about her lies, about her family origin stories. And anyway, it's going to be a long day. It is raining, so there's not much I can do outside anyways. And so, oh, wrong one. I'm sharing my Rumble screen. Great start, Don. Anyway, so much more I can talk about, but let's get into it.
Are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene, and now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war.
Yeah, to try to prevent it.
Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners.
So right off the gate, his first fucking question, and he gets it way fucking wrong. Way wrong. This is a potential vice president. A potential vice president. Anyways, I'm having a hard time speaking this week. Oh my goodness. It's because I don't talk to a lot of people during the days. And so whenever I do speak, it's usually either talking to my dogs a little bit or on these live videos. Anyway, his misinformation, propaganda impacts the entire world. We cannot do what we fucking did in Afghanistan and Iraq and every other fucking place that we've been, right? There's staged and planned events that are created by these fucking numbnuts and funded by these numbnuts. And it's killing lots of people on all fucking sides. And I'm talking about civilians too, right? And infrastructure that are needed. Anyway.
Oh my God. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental. Yeah. And ending the
hostages back would also mean that Netanyahu has to actually come to the fucking table with agreements and stuff like that, and actually like he's the one that's preventing the hostages from being released. And again, he's also the one that's organized the people that are holding them. So Tim Walz, you're a fucking joke, because if you don't know that you're getting played like a fiddle,
humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding.
Did she say a calmness? Because she wanted to be seated with notes for her presidential debate, and this woman gets coddled everywhere she goes because of her anxiety, or whatever you want to call it. And again, I have complex PTSD, so manage it. You fucking deal. She wanted the presidential debate for the first time in history, again, to be altered and changed because of her emotional instability. So you want that for your president? Okay.
That our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me. And she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable.
We're also worried because of you as well. So again, I'm not going to just talk about Walz and not about Vance. His connections and ties to the CIA, with biometrics, with Palantir, with various organizations internationally, okay, that are like essentially creating surveillance states, and a lot of overreach, right? And anyway, so there's concerns that people have with both of these candidates, and yes, even Trump and Kamala as well. So I slam Kamala, but I also slam Trump as well, right? And so yeah. But if I was to have to pick, and it would be Trump out of these people, like right out of Biden and Harris and Trump, I would choose Trump, even though I know that he comes with like how he handled COVID, pushing for the vaccines to be released immediately, believing in what Fauci was saying. Even though he was president, he didn't admit that the moon landings were fake or any of this stuff like that. He didn't admit the reality of the world. So does he know this? Does he not know this? Yeah, there was just a few things that are, he introduced Space Force. And again, if there's going to be some kind of a staged and planned fake alien invasion and stuff like that scene, that's going to be internationally viewed, then again, I mean, if he's someone that, is not aware of this stuff, not tracking this stuff, then he's not suitable either at this point. We need to have people at the highest fucking levels in our country that know they're being lied to by these international lobbyists and propagandists, like the Kissingers, the Soroses, the Schwabs, the Hararis. Come on. The Netanyahus.
I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again.
And they've got to know that
Now,
the heads of their CIA and FBI and Secret Service and all these people that they're also bribed and blackmailed and bought and covering a lot of shit.
To this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially, launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
What if
Thank
the
you,
bad guys are
Senator.
internal?
Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an
Not the last
American
3.5 years.
aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what, the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead. And
Okay, so she's going to talk about Helene, and I guarantee you neither of them know the reality of what's going on with that as well. Maybe they do. Maybe they know about the possibility that there's lithium mines or resources in these areas, and some of these areas that are very appealing to people and have been for, again, several years. Before I get into that, though, and weather modification, geoengineering that was also possibly involved, especially because of the flooding and where it was located and the elevations. But anyways, on my whiteboard that I still have, I haven't even had to fucking change it yet because I wrote this in January of 2022 and for 2023, 2024. And anyways, geoengineering, weather modification, all that stuff, like the flooding, the mud floods, and the heavy rains and stuff like that were absolutely, I mean, they're on the board, right? And the people that are involved, NATO, WEF, UN, philanthropists, FEMA, banks. Anyway, it's behind now. I want to share a video that I don't know if anyone has heard about USS Liberty. I've covered that incident on Rumble a few times, and also where there were Israelis who murdered Americans and Canadians, even working within government, not even military, like even like the like global affairs assets and intelligence, essentially is what they were operating at as, and also murdered. So yeah, let's see what this is about. It's from BitChute, the land of 420.
Proxy who are trained and inculcated in the Zionist regime. How many people believe that it ended with the USS Liberty, really? I mean, think about this one. You have proven, arrested by American Marines in Iraq, Jews sniping and shooting at Marines. And for people who don't believe it, we thought we'd bring on the Colonel because he can tell us some inside stories. But these guys were arrested. Then Zapata Engineering, the so-called contractor company, they got it whitewashed. They got them released, even though the Marines actually chased them down, caught them, and arrested them after they shot at them. These, ladies and gentlemen, are the Jews who live in Israel and who are paid by American Jewry and who are Americans and Europeans in descent, actually killing American soldiers. Seems unbelievable. Wolfgang, what have you seen on this situation?
Well, I've talked to lots of Iraqi vets at the place where I took you to, and as you can tell, that's an immense complex. And there's lots of men that I go through every day and talk to about different things that happen over in the Middle East. And what they told me specifically was that the most of the snipers were not even Iraqis. They were actually IDF, which means Israeli Defense Force.
This is an incredible statement coming from a colonel in the U.S. military that the majority of the sniping, the precise sniping that has been used to...
Okay, so I just want to clarify too, this is a colonel speaking out, right? So this is a very high ranking officer. And so like he would have a lot more experience and knowledge about what's going on than people like Vance and Walls.
Kill and wound in sensitive places, men who have armor, knowing where the armor is not protecting, and having the sophistication to put a bullet into these people is from Israel. Unbelievable.
And that's not all. We'll talk about that tonight.
Yeah, and who's involved with Mossad? Maxwell's and Epstein's and Netanyahu.
وثقيل وإلى الميدان أقدم لو رآه الماء وثقيل وإلى الميدان أقدم لو رآه الماء وصدر الشاشين.
I guess trigger warning. I don't know. I mean, if you're on my channel, then I mean it's implied, but.
صامت تحت شاشنوي أصوع صامد في صدره شاشنوي أصوع صامد في صدره أنه يدري أدعى أنه يدري أدعى كافرا فوق الأعالي لا قضى الموت
I've shared this video before.
فالإذاعات غناء ونشيدا فالإذاعات غناء ونشيدا بائع الذر ولا تشركن فداء أو قصاصا قد فل حديدا فأحيي الأرض ودع مشعلة قد فل حديدا فأحيي الأرض ودع مشعلة دمي حبرا دمي حبرا الأرض ودع مشعلة وقطع الباب الأرض ودع مشعلة وقطع الباب وقطع.
And I will say though that some of these clips could possibly be manipulated and faked, because there are crisis actors and role players that I've also shared, not only within Iraq and Afghanistan, and but also Palestine and Israel and all over the U.S. and Europe. And so anyway.
أو قصاصا دفاعا أو صمودا
المنبر يفوح أريجها أعطر جواد الفجر عداء له ضبح وإيراء سنابق الأرض مضطربا ينادي فديت يا مسجد أنا درع كوجه البدر مختلطا
تمضي الجنة لا تخشى تمضي الجنة لا تخشى لا نبالي بالأعادي على المنى
I'm going to show you, I'm going to have to go back a year, but I want to, so bear with me. So many videos. True Earth facts. Oh, that's my video. So that's my whiteboard. Moon landing hoaxes. A long time ago, I was talking about that. Okay. So we're almost at the year mark, so it should be approximately 52 weeks. We're in the 50 range. See so many good videos that see Northwoods. This was like last year. Historic conspiracies via Northwoods. 9/11 truths. Who writes the scripts? They are lying, knowing people are dying. Ceasefire voted for by 120 countries. I've got the 201 in there. Debunking the biggest conspiracy theories. Overpopulation. I think that is also a hoax. Breaking news on Israel-Palestine conflict. Again, so again, that was like a while ago. And again, only 166 views. Israel-Palestine, I shared false flags, crisis actors, media propagandists. Debunk, anyways. Hiding, censoring Israeli hostage interviews. This is again over a year ago. Well, not over a year ago, but a year ago. False flag operations that got us into to get us into World War III. This was again like last year. I've been talking about this for years, right? False flag operations internationally that are going to get us involved in this, and they've already updated the draft in the U.S. And anyway, and drafts if we don't get the truth out. And again, it's been updated. So again, I'm not a psychic. I'm not none of these things. I'm not an oracle. It's just this is so blatantly obvious to me. And so predictable that I've just been calling it all out, right? And most things land. Sometimes I get like little things wrong, but then I clarify. So and anyways, move on from that. But I've even been able to accurately predict dates with even within a day of major significant events happening, because it's that predictable. It's not a brag. It's just there are other people like me that are also working at the highest levels of government, and they're trying to share this information to people like Justin Trudeau and Marco Menincino. Even myself personally, I've reached out to these people, and Bill Blair and you name it, Pierre Poilievre, and they don't want to fucking listen. But if you are paid to listen, then you got to do it, right? Anyway, USS Liberty. I talked about this last year. Yeah. And then I'm talking about terrorists hiding within Hamas, just like Mossad, IDF, NATO, Hezbollah, and more, right? So I'm calling out people within all these organizations that are just not doing a fucking good job. Well, they're doing a great job for the people that they're working for, but not for the collective. And again, last year was the Gaza hospital attack or parking lot. Because even people like Melanie Joly, these people that are supposed to know this stuff, she was lying about it. And she's still, even like weeks later, and Bill Blair, They did a Minister of National Defense, Emergency Preparedness people, the international representatives for Canada, like these, like no idea. Talk about Ari Ben Menashe, John Baird, Dominic LeBlanc, like friggin' anyway. Yeah, Israel, Palestine, Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah, Mossad. I was talking about all this being involved. Still even here. Again, I was covering this more than anyone, and getting it the most right. It's never going to be perfect, right? Because there's just so much to go through, and there's just so much out there. So Israel attack 9/11 level because it's planned by a few of the same people. That's why I was going with that. And again, it's something to get us into another war in the Middle East. So fucking predictable, these people. I call out Joe Rogan and Alex Jones potentially being controlled opposition. I would still like to go on their shows because I don't think they're necessarily coming from a bad place. I just think that they're listening to people that are just I don't know, deceiving them. And maybe just giving them a lot of like money or prestige and stuff like that and notoriety, and so they don't want to ruin that. I don't know. I'm not them. Talk about FEMA. That the FEMA alert. This was even before, I believe, the attack. Let me just see. I'm just going to go on it because that's interesting, because I was saying in that video when I was talking about the FEMA alert, I was talking about before that as well, that on October 4th. So yeah, again, this was before the attack, and I was saying even in September, I'll probably pull up that video as well, but I was saying between the 4th and the 7th, sorry, the 4th and the 11th of October, especially because of the religious celebrations during that time, especially in Israel. And again, it's to elicit an emotional response in people, like the most, right? That's why, like, even within within North America, when it was like the most significant Easter holiday that we had, like that day is when they pushed the the trans day of whatever you want to call it, reconciliation, or anyway. And that was a huge slap in the face to a lot of Christians, right? Who do, because a lot of people within the Christian faith do not believe that homosexuality should be practiced. They believe it's a sin, and again, it's in their book, or how they're following the book. And so yeah, it's and so it was a very, very insulting, and again, it triggered a lot of people, and that's why it was done. And then even with the Emergency Act in Canada being declared, like 3 weeks after the friggin' the Freedom Convoy came into Ottawa, it was on Valentine's Day that it was declared. And again, this is just another thing to ruin holidays for people, right, of significance. And then even like another lockdown that was kicked off. I believe it was the end of 2021. Again, it had us in lockdown like around Christmas, like just like within days of Christmas, and it was again to anyway. I think that this is by design, and so I was saying that there was possibly going to be something that was going to be connected to the U.S. and when FEMA is involved, like sometimes this is also a red flag, because they were even on site before like 9/11 events happened, and things happened in Lahaina and countless other places throughout the world where they were just conveniently there, as that they knew what was going to be going on. And then also within the attacks, they were there. And anyway, so I was going to say between the 4th, because they were going to do like that alert, that national alert test on the 4th, and they said that if it didn't happen that day, then it was going to be with like the following week or whatever it was. And I'm like, oh my god, like I might be within this time that anyway. So again, it was just me thinking about things out loud, and sure enough, like I had it within the friggin' week and year, because I was also saying like Netanyahu had just gotten into power on the 29th of December, 2022. And I'm like, look at his track record. Fuck, you know, and there's people within Israel that were protesting him being the leader and protesting what's going on, and still are. And people aren't seeing that. But anyway, if people want to know really what's going on in Israel and Palestine and the Middle East and stuff like that, I would recommend looking at my videos. Anyway, I think that's how I will leave it for Israel and Palestine. I don't think that anyone should be murdered on either side, right? That's why I'm talking about this as well. Like when I'm talking about IDF shooting on its own, it's because that their own want this to be known. They want the truth to come out. Friends, families, and survivors want the truth out there. And so this is also helping Israel, Israelis, people that are not profiting and benefiting from the military pharmaceutical industrial complex right now. These people are hurting. Okay. And so even within Palestine as well, there are women and children and elderly people getting murdered on a regular basis, raped, tortured, etc., imprisoned. And I, like, you can't support this. Like, I don't understand how people are seeing this as some kind of a like self-preservation or Israel just protecting itself. It's not. It's Netanyahu, but anyway. Sorry, keep on going on all these tangents.
Hundreds more are missing. Scientists say
Yes,
climate
this is
change makes these hurricanes larger,
Switching gears.
stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then of course afterwards to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. And Nora, you asked about—
Oh my God, me too. Yeah. I don't know where you're from, but it's so bad in Canada because we have a radical in charge of the whole climate change scam and the carbon tax scam, all that stuff, and all the billions of dollars that are being funneled to these friggin' organizations. They're not even showing any proof that any of it's actually working. And first of all, it's not, because again, it's just going in the pockets of people that are already goddamn rich, that are not even, they don't even care about Canadians or the world. It's currentist, corporatist, propagandist, opportunists that are, yeah, anyway.
Climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change.
Yeah,
well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover. But we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront.
See, this is the Trump that I like. This is what I mean. That's why, like, these are things like that is why I choose him over Biden any day of the week, right? It's by far, but even though there's questions and concerns about him, unfortunately, and his ties and affiliations to Mossad and IDF, anyway, all that stuff, KGB, CIA. But he also wanted to stop giving so much money or no money at all to the World Health Organization because he was calling them out too, and WEF, and so there's things that he has done that are incredibly beneficial, not only to his country, it's absolutely beneficial, but also, and they're getting more money for their own citizens. And by the way, how come that money is not getting diverted to the places that need it right now because of all the damage that's been caused? And even people in Lahaina, these homes have not been rebuilt yet. This is disgusting. And they just invested, I think it was like $500 million that same day. Biden announced $500 million to go to Taiwan. I can't even make this shit up. And I think that they were saying that they can actually successfully get rid of homelessness within the US with approximately $2 billion. Yeah. And where's that money going?
Able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country.
Speaking about EV, electrical vehicles, electrical, you name it, facilities in order to create these. Also, Walls and Kamala and their friends and people within their network a few years ago, they have shares and stocks in these companies. So, and these are the people that are pushing about like having like no more fuel emissions and all that stuff. Like they're demonizing petroleum. They're talking about carbon as if it's like as if it's a bad thing in the environment, when it actually turns out that it's actually we've thrived, not only humans but other living species. And trees and plant life as well. When there was higher levels of carbon within the environment. And it's also needed. It's fundamentally needed to sustain life. And these people are lying. They're spinning narratives. They're creating policies and mandates and bills and stuff like that are literally doing nothing but profit. They're fucking like the companies that they have shares and stocks in. That's racketeering.
Country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate.
It's funny that they're intentionally destroying farmland. They're buying up, like the Bill Gates of the world, buying up large quantities of farmland in North America, and there's such an attack on farmers and people living in rural areas with even forced inoculations of their animals if they're not abiding by their codes and what they're trying to push, including poisoning the friggin' soil with chemicals and pesticides and things like this, and not able to use their own seeds in order to regrow crops the following years, and having to harvest crops again that where you need time for the soil to replenish and stuff like that. And so they're it's over industrialization using and attack on farmers. Even in Canada, there are farmers that are shutting down every single day, every single week, all over the place. And this is harming us, completely harming us, and increases in carbon tax. So anyone in rural areas or on farmlands, they're not using like electrical vehicles or electricity to heat a large percentage of the buildings they use to heat their to heat their animals, to store their vehicles that are needed, to fuel their tractors and other large vehicles that are needed in order to till and soil the land and manage like large crop or livestock. I mean, large quantities of animals. And even myself, I'm on petroleum. It's natural gas, but and so that's largely something. And then my fireplace that heats my home. And anyway, such an increase, so they can't afford it. So there's a lot of people, depending on how large their farms are, they're paying an additional hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars a month more just since April, and people cannot afford this. They can't sustain this, and these are the people that are keeping our country, clean. It's where we're able to produce our own agriculture to sustain the societies, and anyway, it's all being destroyed. And I just want to kick off like a story that I shared on my my Instagram. I don't know why I said it like that on my Instagram. It's because I'm wearing a dress. I'm feeling bougie.
Agriculture in particular. That was a period when the number of farmers increased. It was a period when the price of farmland rose. Now, of course, then as now, every farmer would have liked it better if he had done still better. What happened then, of course, was that the spread of farms, increasing productivity, the development of machinery, the bringing under the plow of productive land led to a great increase in production, which led to a decline in the prices of farm products.
Oh,
so it's true, the prices of farm products went down.
Oh, so the opposite of what Chrystia Freeland and Marco Menchino and Justin Trudeau and Stephen Guilbeault and these idiots are doing. The opposite of what they're doing right now. Interesting. You want prices to go down?
That was a sign of success. It was not a sign of failure. And the evidence that it was a sign of success was a rise in the price of farmland. After all, if this decline in the price of products had been a sign of failure, if it had been an indication that the farmer was being ground under the heel of Wall Street, why would people have been willing to pay higher and higher prices for the land from which those crops were produced? So the actual story is one of a great growth of productivity in agriculture, a great development of agriculture in this country.
I'm going to replay it because this needs...
With respect to agriculture in particular, that was a period when the number of farmers increased. It was a period when the price of farmland rose. Now, of course, then as now, every farmer would have liked it better if he had done still better. What happened then, of course, was that the spread of farms, increasing productivity, the development of machinery, the bringing under the plow of productive land led to a great increase in production, which led to a decline in the prices of farm products. So it's true, the prices of farm products went down, but that was a sign of success. It was not a sign of failure. And the evidence that it was a sign of success was a rise in the price of farmland. After all, if this decline in the price of products had been a sign of failure, if it had been an indication that the farmer was being ground under the heel of Wall Street, why would people have been willing to pay higher and higher prices for the land from which those crops were produced? So the actual story is one of a great growth of productivity in agriculture, a great development of agriculture in this country.
Beautiful. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. So price fixing, controlling, commercialized agriculture, like all this stuff does not work. Does not work. Look at the forced labor, even for young children, even kids getting born into slavery, essentially, in order to manage farmlands and stuff like that in multiple different countries. Anyway. And this could all be done in people's own countries, even places like India and China. A large percentage of their land is uninhabited. Even in the US, I think it's like 95% of the land is uninhabited. Canada, it's like 98%. And in places like China, it's between 80 and 85%, depending on the what you look at. And you can see this because when you look up, there's so many different like surveillance equipment devices that can be used with heat signatures included in that to see just like where the like energy is being utilized. And so like you look at electricity, like the grid, you look at like a heat signatures from anyways, fireplaces, all that stuff. You can see it like literally from overhead, and you can even see the comparisons of the of the significant differences in North Korea and South Korea. And look at North Korea again. Like these are also people that are forced into growing food and managing livestock, and it's getting sent to other countries, and people are starving. Continue on with the debate. And yeah, with Trump, and I'll readily admit, I'll keep on admitting that. Like again, I don't think either Harris or Trump are what's needed for, again, not only just the U.S., but they profoundly impact a lot of like every other country, unfortunately, at this point. And because of what Trump did with COVID and with Space Force and a bunch of other things, that there's still concerns, and he's not sharing the truth. He did not take that opportunity to share the truth about, again, the moon landing hoaxes and 9/11 and January 6th. Well, I mean, that was before his time, so I'll correct that. The shape of the earth. There's so many other things that he hasn't told us, and it's time. It's time.
Mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that
I think if you took the possible alleged population of the world, correct me if I'm wrong, because Eric Dubay did a video on this, and they would fit comfortably within the state of Texas.
the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris.
What makes it look like that, like the world is so overpopulated, is because of the density within like cities, and then how they push out into places that were suburbs, and then it just becomes way too overdeveloped and unsustainable. Throughout history, this has happened, right? We see so many elaborate ghost cities, major city centers where there was millions of people that were living in these areas, and again, it's not something that's sustainable, and I'll leave it at that. But that's what makes it look like there's just so many more people, and then you add in a different like melange and mosaic of people, it looks like it's even more of an issue, when people should be on their own accord moving out to more rural areas. It's definitely a bit of a lifestyle shift, but that's closer to how we're supposed to be living anyways. And just have a couple of acres, or or if you can afford it, get like a bunch of acres, and then just get into that fucking lifestyle. And there's a lot of people that generationally they're not taking over the farmlands as well, that their families have managed for years. So I'm seeing that as well, where like men in their 20s and 30s, they're just not up to the task. They don't want to have that lifestyle, and it's literally at their fingertips to have. And they anyway, it is what it is.
And her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important.
I keep on going on all these tangents because I'm talking about overpopulation. I've got videos on that as well, but I've showed this as well. I tabulated. So you look at the statistics and the censuses that are out on all the countries, and I included like even like the surrounding areas. So like cities, like the most populated cities, like the top 300 populated like cities and then areas again that are surrounding. I threw that into an Excel spreadsheet. I auto summed, and it came out to 1.56 billion. And so how are we accounting for the remaining 5 to 6 billion, 6.5 billion people? Are we how are we doing that, right? When I'm counting the most populated areas, and it's not even coming close. Even if you doubled it, right, it would be like 3 to 3.5 billion people in the world. But how can you do that when, again, you're factoring in the 300 like major countries and the major cities and anyway.
To touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
There is a
gas.
nuclear facility that used to be called the 3 Mile, whatever you want to call it, 3 Mile Island or whatever it is, like a nuclear facility in New York. And Microsoft under Bill Gates is going to be the one that completely owns that. And so nuclear energy, like there's such a stigma surrounding it. But this, I believe, to be radiating magnetic energy that can also be harnessed and utilized, free, clean energy that could be more effective than electricity, or that could at least work, with electricity in order to again, have a better energy system out there. And so, yeah, it can also be used to harness energy.
We got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by
your
the
time
climate.
is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil, but the folks know. And like I said, again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our #1 export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that. And an all above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, Do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history. 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still
Because of
more
how
work to
high
do.
it was the
But
year
let's go
before.
back
Oh
to
my
this on
gosh.
immigration. Kamala Harris
Oh
was the
God.
attorney general of the largest
This guy-
state and border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs
That's a
for
lie?
human trafficking and drug interventions. Look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this. And that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen.
No, you
It
don't.
was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary. But the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Lankford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this? Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been. And it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico. You've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well,
exactly.
It is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street.
Illegal immigrants.
Regulators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look,
no one's really saying anything about anyone that's coming here legally. Yeah, there are people, you know what I mean, that'll just anyway.
Also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn now to the economy. Thank you.
Margaret, the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status.
Yeah, I was going to elaborate, but then I was like, you know what? I don't want this to go on too long. But this video is going to be long no matter what, because this is something that I also have shared in previous videos. People that are going in as foreign temporary workers, and or coming and claiming asylum or refugee status because of bogus bullshit lies, right? When it has to do with like pronouns and gender, you know what I mean? Like just stuff that they're lying about just to get them into this country, and then they're getting money like monthly salaries essentially, and it's taxpayers within Canada that are funding this, and there are millions of people that are here that are doing this and exploiting the system. They're the ones that are increasing the housing crisis. There's a huge increase in rapes and violent crimes within Canada. I already shared the stats multiple times over the last few days again. And yeah, there's so much I can get into. And then even the like the students, people coming out here under student visas, and known terrorists or people that become radicalized and or that are involved in like anti-Canadian, anti-American rhetoric and stuff like that, including like 9/11, those dancing Israelis and the E-team or whatever they were called. Those were terrorists that came to the U.S. as students, and even in Canada recently we had this guy within Quebec who was here as under a student visa, and apparently he was picked up as a terrorist who was allegedly planning on attacking a mosque in New York recently, and so there are a lot of people that are here for like not good reasons, and they're here to exploit our resources, including our finances. And so there's just a lot. And so, yeah. And I know people that work at CBSA, even at the highest levels, or in people on the like at the kiosks or whatever you want to call it, and they are saying it's getting really frustrating because they know that people are lying about why they're coming here seeking asylum or refugee status, and they have no choice but to fucking process.
At the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the
they are, and they're just refusing to. They're flat out saying that they're not going to do that. And this is, you know what, maybe I'll get into the Kamala Harris video before going on to this, because she covers a lot of the points, right, about when there's wars, whether it be civil or international wars, whenever there's like a large volume of people that leave certain areas to seek asylum or refugee status in other countries, they're also bringing in a lot of people that are not going to be aligned with the cultures, ideologies, and rules and laws of the countries that they're working within, and they've caused throughout history a lot of damage. And yeah, so it's not just Operation Paperclip. Stop. And I'm going to share that video from Candace Owens. She is great. And she really, I mean, just this video was so good with volume.
As I predicted, how did I do that? Either I have. All right, buckle up, boys, because we are headed to World War III, just as I predicted. How did I do that? Either I have a crystal ball and my name is Miss Cleo, call me now, or this has been the most obviously planned war in the history of obviously planned wars. It's actually insulting to me how obvious this is. We're going to get to the Middle East, but first.
I mean, if you want the first Black female president, right there, way better than Kamala. Like, she knows way more qualified.
We have to take a closer look, rather, at Donald J. Harris. After many of you were sending me clips of Judge Joe Brown, this is so random, speaking about how he knew Donald. And yeah, he claims that Donald was not Black.
Yep.
All that coming up on Candace.
Yep. This was such a good video. Oh my God. And I know it's long, but you could like listen on 1.5 speed when this is finished on the live, or just Zoom.
So I am totally like a crazy person obsessed with this investigation, because there is something so right in front of our face that we are stumbling upon, and this woman now scares me. I'm very scared by somebody who can just put on an entire act about their identity, and I'm very scared about what I'm coming across through all of these files, searching things, these slight name changes, taking on different identities. Yep. It seems pretty obvious to me that we are hitting upon some sort of an organized communist cell. You know, yesterday I had asked you guys to please send me anything regarding Alvis Cambridge's marriage to Cynthia Cambridge, because I couldn't find anything about it. And somebody did find something. He changed the spelling, or maybe if we're being nice here, the journalist got the spelling of his marriage announcement wrong, but they did find it in the Kingston Gleaner. So I just want to start there, because I want to provide that update. Here it is. Alvis Cambridge's marriage announcement in the Kingston Gleaner, dated June 30th, 1953. It reads, "The wedding of Miss Cynthia Lopez, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. H.A. Lopez of," and it's a little cut off here, but Bushy St. Catherine Parish, it looks like, and Mr. Alvis St. Elmo Cambridge, the son of Mr. and Mrs. U.L. Cambridge. It goes on to state elsewhere that Mr. Beavis Campbell was best man, and Mr. John Strudwick, who I recognize because that would be Carmen's husband. In case you're wondering who Carmen is, that is White Iris's sister, because she was the maid of honor in their wedding, and she eventually gets married to somebody with the last name Strudwick. So John Strudwick was, in fact, the best man here. So this is a very, very close family for him to be the best man. And Raymond Stewart were ushers at the ceremony, which was performed by Reverend J. Leslie McPherson. Now, even of more interest is they also have the exact same wedding song as Iris Cambridge and Oscar Harris. Again, these people seem pretty close-knit, almost a little too close-knit. But I do want to point out there that it says Alvis Cambridge's parents are Mr. and Mrs. U.L. Cambridge. So that is either incorrect or that is an intentional deviation, or rather just not a match. Because if we go back and take a look at Iris and Oscar Harris's wedding announcement, we're going to pull that up. So this is Iris, whatever you want to call her, Cambridge's wedding announcement to Oscar Harris. We can see that the names of the parents are different, just slightly different. We have, what was it, A.L. Cambridge, Mr. and Mrs. I got to find it here, a bouquet by her father. I just don't see it in this little tidbit that you've pulled up, but I'm pretty sure it's A.L. Cambridge. So they have different initials. I know that V.S. Cambridge right there at the top. Mr. and Mrs. V.S. Cambridge versus Mr. and Mrs. U.L. Cambridge. So does that signify to us that they are not related, that they're lying about their parents' names? I could not find a Mr. and Mrs. U.L. Cambridge anywhere in St. Elizabeth Parish in Jamaica at this time. And again, we cannot find Alvis's birth certificate. So this is just another huge question mark. But what we do know for certain is that he was exceedingly close to Iris Cambridge. Everyone who has emailed me, and based on my own research, it looked like they were brother and sister. Now we're wondering maybe they're first cousins. We definitely know that they spent the majority of their lives together. There are so many pictures of Alvis and White Iris hugging all throughout their lives, holding hands, all of this, which was posted under his obituary. Just so many pictures proving that the three of them, his wife Cynthia Lopez, White Iris, and him, were exceedingly close and lived in the Broward County area. Not only that, but they traveled together here to America. They landed in Miami together aboard a ship. Now, I want to show you something that's actually fascinating. So we've already deduced that for whatever reason, they, and by they, I'm referring obviously to Kamala's family, particularly Donald Harris and Kamala herself, are trying to pass off via a sleight of hand White Iris as Black Iris, okay? And break this down again, to be real careful here. Black Iris is Iris Finnegan. He claims that Iris Finnegan, Black Iris, is Kamala's great-grandmother. She claims that it's her great-grandmother in her book, and we see no evidence of that aside from this picture, which Donald claims that he shot of Kamala sitting on her lap. I felt that Iris was the help. What we know about Iris Finnegan is that her maiden name is Allen. So she was born Aura Iris Allen Finnegan. Yep. Okay. And then she marries allegedly Patrick Finnegan and takes on the Finnegan last name. Okay. White Iris, on the other hand, was born Iris Cambridge and takes on the last name Harris. And she also has a baptismal name named Vioris. So she becomes Iris Cambridge Harris. Well, check this out. Okay. In 1958, Cynthia Cambridge and her now husband, Freemason Alvis Cambridge, arrived on a first-class ship into Miami from Jamaica. And aboard that ship was also Iris F. Harris. Now, pause. What is wrong with this? Go back up. What is wrong with this? Her middle initial. Why on earth? Now, it makes sense that Iris and Alvis and Alvis's wife are all on the ship together coming from Jamaica. They make a stop. The last port they stop at is Nassau, Bahamas, before they arrive into Miami. But why is Iris's middle initial F? She was not born. She was never married into a Finnegan family. Why did she adopt that middle initial? That's huge. It's very strange that she would have done that. Remember, Donald is alleging that Black Iris, the great-grandmother, right, at no point her last name would have been Harris, just Finnegan. She was born Iris Aura Allen, again, just reiterating that, and she became Finnegan when she got married to Patrick Finnegan. So we know that this is not her on board this ship with the Harris last name. We know for a fact that that is our White Iris who married Oscar Harris. But she never had a middle initial F. I think this is the earliest indication that she was taking on the identity of the help. I remain convinced convinced that Miss Iris was in fact the help. I told you guys yesterday that we are trying to locate this older woman who wrote this comment under a YouTube video. It actually wasn't even our YouTube video. It was somebody else that was covering my content. She wrote this, if you want to pull that comment up. I am 76 years old. Years ago, I read an article about Kamala's family of slave owners. Miss Iris was one of the house slaves of Kamala's family. When the slaves got set free, Miss Iris was old and didn't want to leave the family. Miss Iris also had a daughter who was raised in the house with Kamala's family. Kamala's parents worked out of town a lot, so Kamala was basically raised by the Black women that worked in that house. If I remember correct, her mom was a professor in some big universities, and possibly her father held a government job and traveled a lot. I can't remember where the article was, but if you find it, you will have all the proof that you need. So I really would like to pick this woman's brain. I would like to speak to her and see if she can recall where this was published, because that so fits into everything that I've been saying. And like I said, part of this was just me exploring my own heritage. Like I told you, my grandfather obviously was one of these families after slavery was abolished that opted in North Carolina. His family opted to just stay and continue working as sharecroppers. And so they worked on the same family that had enslaved them, they now worked for. So that makes sense. What that woman posted makes sense, but a YouTube comment is not proof. Do you think seeing Iris F. Finnegan is some early indication? Now, there's even more proof, of course, that at the very least, the bare minimum, Kamala Harris is not Black. It isn't just Janet Jackson. Funny who the media picks on and who the media stays away from, because Judge Joe Brown has the credentials. This is a person that they know is intelligent, has had a talk show on TV, I guess you could say a judge show on TV for a very long time. And many of you guys were emailing me clips of him on the show discussing the fact that he knew Kamala's father and that he just simply knows that the family is not Black. Take a listen to this first clip before we jump into the second one.
She was everybody's favorite Hindu Indian prosecutor and attorney general and senator. Now she becomes Black. But, you know, I met her daddy.
Weird.
Fine gentleman, Professor Harris. And the problem with her being Black is Professor Harris says he's Caucasian, mixed Irish and Hindu. He doesn't have any Black ancestors, but his Irish ancestors owned a lot of slaves in Jamaica and had them to work on plantation. So if mama is on the birth certificate listed as a Caucasian, daddy says he's a Caucasian Hindu and has no Black ancestors, how did she get to be Black?
I mean, the math is not mathing. How did she become Black? It doesn't make sense. Okay. It only makes sense if you stole the identity of the help, which is so sick, so twisted, so diabolical, so offensive that we demand a response to this. Like I said, if a single Black person is okay with this and votes for her because the media simply decided to make her Black, to essentially wave a little Harry Potter wand and go, oh, okay, we just need you to be Black because we need those Black votes, right? And you're okay with that, you should really re-examine your life. You should deeply, spiritually search within yourself to determine what is wrong with you, that you would allow this sleight of hand to allow to compel you to vote for this woman, despite her horrific record, by the way, of locking up Black men. Who is this woman? Two parents that were committed communists. Who is this woman? And that's not all Judge Joe Brown had to say in the matter of Kamala Harris.
Communists.
Take a listen.
And the birth certificate that she has is interesting because the confusion comes from a mistake. On the birth certificate, it lists the mother's race as Caucasian, national origin into India, and religion Hindu. For the father, it does not list national origin. It does not list religion. It does not list anything about that, but where it says race, they put national origin in Jamaica by mistake. Now, if you've ever been to Jamaica and you go over to St. Elizabeth Parish, you see all the high, bright, and white that live in Jamaica. So I've got a good friend retired from law enforcement. He has a white wife, blonde haired, blue eyes, but she was born in Jamaica. Her parents were born in Jamaica. One's blonde and blue eyed, the other one's red haired and gray eyed. And they happen to be related to the King of England because they are aristocrats in England, but they were born in Jamaica. It's not unusual. You're not black just because you're from Jamaica, and they have a whole lot of white people that never left, and their ancestors owned a lot of slaves. The Maroons went up into the hill country and got themselves free back in the 1840s, but, you know, other than that, it is what it is in Jamaica. So just because you're from that country does not mean you are of the black race. So the problem is why don't you go get your daddy to give you an affidavit that you have a black ancestor? And since the only possible claim you have is through your great grandmother, who he says was a Hindu house servant that just happens to be swarthy, where'd you get your blackness from? See, you're faking it again.
Hindu house servant is what they are alleging that Iris was. And I am telling you, the fact that I just picked up on that in a vibe in a picture, do not tell me women do not have good gut instincts. I was just like, there's just something about the photo. It just wasn't loving. It felt very much like the help who got close with the kids, but didn't want to be too close to the kids because, you know, you never know when the mom's going to get upset because you're too close to the kids, kind of a kid situation. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? A lot of this stuff is just common sense, but it's just not that common anymore. People are just like, I cannot believe my own eyes. I need to read the media. And CNN says that she's Jamaican. And then people were just confused. Like, they were literally asking the question, she was in Jamaica. How can you say that she's not black? How can you even ask me this question? Like, where is your common sense? If I up and move to Sweden, I get to suddenly say I'm white? What's wrong with you guys? I mean, this is like common sense. Of course, there are white people in Jamaica. There are white people everywhere. There are white people in Africa. Does not make them black. Elon Musk is not a strong black man. As much as I would love for him to be able to say he's a strong black man, he really upsets the left. That's just not the circumstance. There's no version of reality that we exist in. And so this is fascinating. This is fascinating because this shows you a tremendous character flaw that we are stumbling upon. And a person that will steal an identity, like I said, a true communist trade. This is what they did. They were the best at it. They always took on different names. They took on different identities. They would style themselves differently. You have to remember that there was this influx of people also that were coming in from Russia. So many of the ills that we have in society today is because we received so many immigrants and there was no correct process of filtration to determine which one of these psychos, you know, amongst these people, how many of these people were the absolute.
This is really what I wanted you guys to watch because like she was so bang on with this. This is why, like I was saying, like, you know, Candace for president, people would say that she doesn't have the experience. Knowledge is power. Okay, the pen is mightier than the sword and knowledge is power. So the fact that she knows a lot more about what's going on, the reality of the world, than Kamala or Trump at this point, you know, it really is impressive.
Influx of people also that were coming in from Russia. So many of the ills that we have in society today is because we received so many immigrants and there was no correct process of filtration to determine which one of these psychos, you know, amongst these people, how many of these people were the absolute psychos that were mass murdering Christians, okay? Mass murdering Christians leading up and after World War II and throwing us into gulags versus people that were actually escaping for freedom. There was no method. There was no method. There was just an open season of people moving around the world. This is what happens at the end of wars. This is why wars are dangerous. This is why you cannot detach war from various refugees' crises. And what refugees' crises implicate is that people who are bad can slip in through country borders. That is why wars are problematic. And I can't stand the war class that constantly is arguing for more wars, more wars, more wars. We're going to get to that. Okay. So by the way, everything he just
the only people making this about race are the people that are part of like the woke DEI diversity hire groups that are getting funded by the Soros types and the Kissinger types and the Schwab types to push that narrative. It's Kamala that's bringing race into this and gender into this and causing the division that goes along with it. And people are trying to call it out like you're lying about it. Like, so not only are you bringing it in and you're involving it and you're causing division with this rhetoric, but you're also lying about it. It's just, you know.
Said makes complete sense if our suspicions are correct, right? Iris Cambridge is Irish. She is. And Oscar Harris is mixed Irish. That would make Donald Harris majority white. So if Kamala has a majority white father and an allegedly fully Indian mother, who I have my suspicions about, but I'm still taking my time to investigate her mother. I know I promised you that would be today, but I just wanted to dot my I's and cross my T's. Then that would make her indeed Indian Irish, just as Judge Joe Brown recalls. And again, this would be such an easy thing for Donald J. Harris to speak out against. You have two educated people. He'd be like, hey, Judge Joe Brown, what are you talking about? Why are you lying? Do you really think a judge would go on air and say all of those things, risking his reputation, his professional reputation, by just lying boldly? And to what end, by the way? Why would Judge Joe Brown, right? Just again, common sense. Let's invoke a little bit of common sense here. Why would Judge Joe Brown want to come out and claim that he knew that Donald J. Harris was not black? Why would he come out and claim that Kamala Harris was not black? How does that serve anything? He would want her to be black, right? He would love the idea of the first black female president. This is sick and this is disturbing. But by the way, just speaking of that genealogy, speaking of the very likely conclusion that she is majority Irish, that Donald J. Harris is majority Irish, it would also explain why the aforementioned Chris Harris, who signed off on Oscar Harris's death certificate as his son, that's him. These people look like Kamala's relatives. This would be Donald J. Harris's brother, who he intentionally chose not to mention in his piece, probably because, oh, we're trying to make everybody think that Kamala is black. We need the help. We don't need the actual relatives. And this would be an actual relative. That man is extremely light. That man looks like he could be majority white, just as all of the documentation that we have is pointing to. That man would be the son of Iris Harris, who stole that middle initial for whatever reason and became Iris F. Harris on a ship manifest. And speaking of Donald Harris, by the way, I brought this up to you yesterday. What little we can find about him points to the fact that he may have been involved in drama and theater. We were able to confirm him as a student at the Titchfield Secondary School. So that would be like an equivalent to a high school here. This is an article that we found from June of 1955, and you can see highlighted, that Donald Harris is listed under boys under 19. So in 1955, he would have been 17 years old. And you can see that he's listed under a Festival of Arts concert, big event. And then we found another article from 1960, and I think this could be Donald Harris because we haven't been able to find any other Donald Harrises in Jamaica around this time, but he's again in a play. I couldn't read it too close. It looks like it's called Terminus there on the left-hand side. He's playing one of the attendants in the play that has this scene that's at the portal of death. It says that they are performing the last rites and that the play was written by a 20-year-old named Dennis Scott. So what are we to conclude from all of this? The reason why I'm bringing up the fact that he may be in the arts is because this was a focus for a lot of communists, like being able to sell yourself. It is something that I have brought up on the show many times.
I don't agree with Matt Walsh on the moon landings. Like he thinks that they were a hoax, and I know that they were. He thinks that they were not a hoax, and I think that they were a hoax. And I actually, like, I haven't seen a movie in theaters in years. And I went last week, I think, Friday. And it was to watch Am I a Racist by Matt Walsh. And that was such a good movie. And it was in Ottawa. I didn't think there'd be a lot of people watching it, you know, especially on the first day of coming out and the time we went. But it was packed, and it shocked me. But oh my God, that was actually a really good movie, and I do recommend people watch that.
If you begin to look into the history of a lot of these world leaders who look to me like D-list actors, who behave like D-list actors. Don't even get me started on Zelensky constantly wearing military fatigues because he's trying to sell to us that he just needs more and more money and he's really down in the trenches, while we hear rumors that his wife is on shopping sprees in Paris. Don't get me started on the fact.
And then he has friends that have yachts, 2 yachts worth $74 million combined. And that's a way that they hide their wealth and their assets and the money that they're getting from you and I.
That it is true that Zelensky was an actor, a well-known actor. He played the role, okay? President Zelensky played the role of a president on a TV show before he actually
2019, I
became
think.
the president of Ukraine. Are we joking? Are we joking? I have to ask that question. Yes, he was in the arts. There's photos of him dressed up in latex and dancing, and it's all very a lot. It's all very a lot, my friends. That's all I'll say about that. You have Justin Trudeau. You have Emmanuel Macron, how he met his husband. He was in drama. He was in the drama class of Brigitte Macron. And so I just don't like when I start to see people who I believe are dedicated communists, who I can trace back to a history of theater. Again, we don't have a confirmation that that's definitively him, but I would say all the signs point to yes. And we are continuing to investigate him and his relationship with Shyamala Goblin, because I believe that a lot of these marriages at this time, and again, this is a theory not yet proven, were just arranged marriages to get papers. That they had a goal of getting papers, they had a way of getting papers. Sometimes it was simply to have a child get papers, to have anchor babies that could get papers. Whatever the system was, it appears to me that we should be taking a close look at what was motivating all of these marriages and these marriage announcements. I can't find these marriage certificates, but I can always find a marriage announcement. Even that to me feels somewhat suspicious. So we are definitely going to continue to investigate.
Yeah, Matt Walsh. There's multiple things that I disagree with him with completely, and yeah, that's why I'm just saying, like, this one documentary or whatever it is that he did, I did find it very, very interesting. Am I a racist?
Those are just the updates that I have for you today. We're going to take a pause there. Thank one of our sponsors at the Wellness Company, because the world is getting more unpredictable each day. Political insanity, rumors of a civil war, an unstable stock market, and now the looming threat of a new global health emergency. Yup. Did you know that there's a bird flu summit coming up this week in Washington?
Okay, so that was so interesting. It's very interesting, which is going to get into the with the bird flu and stuff like that, and the policies and measures that were implemented. That's going to have international overreach. But I'm going to get back to the debate finally. But first I wanted to share this because I was talking about the floods, and so I wanted to share this.
In North Carolina does not sit well with me. I think something's going on. So I decided to do some digging. So the first thing I find out is North Carolina has the richest deposits of lithium in the entire world. Yeah, lithium for like cars, batteries, all that. Then I find out they have the world's highest purity quartz deposits. And that quartz just so happens to be the world's supply for AI chips, microchips, and all kinds of stuff. We're talking a $530 billion industry. So this is where it gets interesting. So a company by the name of Piedmont Lithium is awaiting a state mining permit for a site in northern Gaston County. And Gaston County is completely flooded right now. The project was awaiting zoning approval because they were getting backlash from the residents and also city officials. And this lithium mine they want would be the third largest producer of lithium in the world. And they made a deal with Tesla already. Now remember the quartz? So in Spruce Pine, North Carolina, right next to Ashland, they are wanting to expand their mines even larger. And the residents aren't having it either. Enter the floods. People, these are mountain towns. It rarely, if not ever, floods in the mountains. I would know. I grew up in the mountains in Colorado, which means none of these people have flood insurance. I mean, the media is saying biblical devastation in North Carolina. This flooding in North Carolina does not
Okay, I just
well.
wanted to share that because it was just interesting. And I was talking about it. And I do want to share some comments from YouTube because people on Rumble don't get to see it. And I do really like where this, I mean, it's all accurate because there are people, and you're completely right. So it's not just Matt Walsh, who I've called out multiple times in multiple videos, but it's also people like Joe Rogan. It's even JP Sears types and Megyn Kelly, and I hate all of this. You know what I mean? But these people are pushing an agenda. Even Tulsi Gabbard and countless others. Right? They're getting some things right. And but I do believe, whether they know it or not, they are controlled opposition, and they're just reading off the scripts, right? And they're pushing an agenda. I totally agree with that. And there was something else like I really liked. Was it this one I shared? Yeah, it could be a very much so like a pressure relief valve for white frustration to divert away from the people behind the agenda. Yeah, just like sports teams and video games and music and Hollywood and the propaganda that's being spewed by cabinet and Senate members and the experts that they're hiring and these international groups that were like FEMA and WEF and WHO and DARPA and CERN and HARP and NASA and RASA and Roscosmos and you friggin' name it anyway. But yeah, it's just there have been white slaves, and there still are throughout history as well. And so even within North America, and so even with Irish slaves coming in, whether it be for working crops or sex slaves, etc. And this even predates some accounts of Black slaves being taken and coming here. And there are still slaves all over the world, people even being born into slavery or being taken and sold to other countries. And it's non-white countries right now, ladies and gentlemen. And there have been people on the seas, white-skinned people that have fought against others to stop slavery and save people. And people don't know that history. And then even with the civil wars within the U.S., again, diversion, yes, so that they wouldn't know about the reality of what was going on. But also it was to end slavery against Black-skinned people, and it was Republicans that were the ones that were on the side of having, like where everyone is created equal, which is true. And it was people within the Democratic parties that were the ones that were the racists, like most owned slaves, and did not want that to stop, right? And so people need to look at the history of that as well. And then even with a Black-skinned man who was a slave, and then he was able to not be a slave in the North. When he got put in jail, there were like thousands of white people that went to the prison where he was being held, and essentially forced them to release him. And then not to mention like people within Canada as well that brought in Black-skinned people like during these awful friggin' times. And anyways. But there's been white and Black slavery. There's been brown slavery. There's been like every friggin' color. I've said this before, and people have colonized and recolonized every friggin' landmass that we have on Earth repeatedly throughout history. And we're not aware of our history. And I wish we were. I wish we were.
Of illegal immigration, Margaret, by
Thank
our
you,
own
Senator, for
leadership.
describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we want to have
app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the
top on his list for what you can afford, not the gas, not the food, not the rent or the mortgages, like none of that stuff. No, it's prescription drugs.
$5 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by a third. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks from Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do, we'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that.
He's a joke. He's a joke. And just to circle back to with people that are pushing an agenda because they're being directly funded for and they profit from exploiting victimhood is Ben Shapiro and unfortunately even Dr. Jordan Peterson. Like I used to listen to a lot of their stuff because it makes sense. Like I'm not going to lie. Again, these are smart men, but again, they are manipulating people with their propaganda that they're pushing, whether they know it or not. And they do share a lot of good content and they do bring on a lot of good guests. But they also bring on a lot of guests, and it's intentionally to push an agenda that is, benefiting them and their families and people they care about, but it's destroying their countries.
Similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say, look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle class and working class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever. How is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years?
Go make your bed.
The last year as president. That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if
Terrifying.
we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries,
Trust the
to
experts,
Mexico,
like the WHO, WEF, Fauci. Come on.
and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong
Netanyahu.
about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. And I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop. And we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
that's a gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim.
The experts, I'm just going to show CDC, like, here's your experts. These are friggin' experts. FDA experts, eh? Come on, guys. This is from Lion Advocacy. Here's a screenshot of the look on Chris Cuomo's face upon being told by former CDC director that the CDC stopped tracking people who got COVID-19 after getting vaccinated because they would make it seem like the COVID-19 vaccine didn't work. The CDC's culpability for this is massive. And Public Health Ontario was doing the same thing. Like, I could just share so much information again, but again, for years I've covered this. So just look at my Rumble videos. You're not going to find it on YouTube. And then I just want to share this as well, since my feed is already up. So news, California enacts law banning voter ID requirements. Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill into law that bars local governments from enacting laws to require residents to show a valid form of identification in order to vote. Oh my God. Not surprised, obviously. I've been saying that as well. And it's because it's their it's his voter demographic. Yeah. That is one thing that I don't agree with. Like, I think people should have valid government ID in order to vote. I believe in freedom of speech, freedom, all of that stuff.
Tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on healthcare then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But
Oh my
Minnesota
God.
Public Radio and other media outlets.
Oh my God. I have videos on that on Rumble. Possibly also a false flag staged and planned event in order to elicit propaganda and emotional responses in people.
Reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year.
This guy.
Can you explain that discrepancy? You have 2
Yeah,
minutes.
well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher.
Who's taking over your family
My
farm?
first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the
Being a
values
good soldier, didn't you flee
that people care
before
about.
deploying?
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this is I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says, you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about healthcare. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women.
We're not.
Pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care.
Yeah, a lot of women had miscarriages when they were inoculated with COVID-19. And other therapeutics also cause harm.
As far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro freedoms for women to make their choices. And we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit. But we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is just your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said, actually, about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay. First of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools, we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA,
I have videos on Sandy Hook. Please look at those. Rumble, Don 189. Oh my God!
NRA guy for a long
This guy
time.
knows
They used to teach gun
nothing.
safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was
He
in my
knows
car so I could pheasant hunt
nothing.
after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat.
All these people.
Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns. And there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz.
And how many illegals are there? Like what they say anywhere between 12 million and 25 million, depending on the stats. That's a lot more people than the actual housing crisis. So again, if you deport a couple million people, problem solved.
The Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. First, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising? And what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is think about it. If a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course, that's not
migrants
true. And again,
that
you
it's
have the
affecting
facts. I
housing
guess we
prices.
agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's again blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists. Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor,
Where's
your
the study?
time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you, gentlemen.
Support.
We have a lot to get through. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. I think it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about.
You know what? I talk about this as well, and I'm controversial on that. But there are a lot of people that would be not a drain on the economy if they would do things within their own lifestyles in order to be just a little healthier. I was even saying this during COVID. Even losing 5 pounds would significantly assist in any symptoms related to any illnesses or diseases or injuries. And then more exposure to sunlight, like healthier eating, filtering water, things like that. And so people, like when there's lifestyle choices that are putting them in the situation that they're in, and where they're needing more prescription medications because they're not doing things within their own lives to mitigate that harm that they're putting on themselves, and the stress on their body, chronically inflamed. And then even within COVID, the people that had this severe outcomes were people that had comorbid conditions that again are attributed to lifestyle. I know it's really hard at this point in life to stay at a healthy weight, but we have to force ourselves a little harder now. Yes, food is more addictive. Yes, there's more harmful chemicals and toxins and oils in it that are harmful to us. We know this, right? Yes, we know that there's things being sprayed in the atmosphere that are harming us. Okay, we need to get out in areas where there's more trees, where there's more filtration of this, where there's less exposure, because again, it's more congregating towards like city areas and suburbs and less in rural areas. It's still absolutely happening, especially like targeting farmlands. But again, we can mitigate this stuff. Filtering water or going on a well, and then eating less processed foods would assist. And then even going for a walk, like 10 minutes a friggin' day, and then being out in the sun, breathing exercises, trying not to drink as much or smoke as much or any of that stuff. But this makes people less of a drain. And I hate saying it like that, but it's a reality on the healthcare system. This is a $1 trillion industry, and it's hundreds of trillions of dollars in the U.S. And it's like pushing prescriptions and vaccines on people, not helping. It's not helping. It's actually harming people. And when there's other ways, even cardarine, which is seen, it's not a SARM, but it's kind of like in that kind of category of some kind of like a performance enhancement. I guess you'd call it like a drug. And it assists in and this is they've done studies on animals on lab mice. I think it was not rats. I think it was mice, and where like they would give like really shitty diets to these to these mice, and essentially create diabetes within these mice, and then they would give cardarine, and then within days, like they're like they would be completely healed or treated and not having that insulin spike resistance that people that are diabetic or pre-diabetic experience. And then also more lean muscle mass, cognitive abilities it significantly improved, more endurance, etc. And things like that. And again, in lifestyle, it's like we need to factor this in more. People need to be more like less of a victim and more doing things at the individual level to make it where they're benefiting not only themselves, but the collective.
Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill, but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done, but when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better healthcare policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason
Can
it
someone
was so
fact check him on that because he lies about everything? And age has nothing to do with wisdom or knowledge, ladies and gentlemen.
important is
He's
I come
he's an
from
ageist.
a major healthcare
And he's
state,
60 years
home
old.
of
He
the
looks
Mayo
70.
Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They're figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't
Oh my
work.
God.
Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher, and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is— So you think the
individual mandate's a good idea?
I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes. Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is.
Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start. The family works better. We stay in their employers. We get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of
I've done this. I've looked at the crime stats and the breakdown, like by homicides, rapes, burglaries, all of that stuff, and like the percentages and and then by year there's graphs and stats, and by what demographic and what ethnicity, age group, everything's broken down. Very, very interesting. Actually, countrywide, Canada included. Very interesting, the trends that have been ongoing since approximately 2017, 2018 period.
Paid family medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare because, look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on childcare as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families, cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care?
I think because of how the education system is now internationally, I would go with homeschooling before.
Shortage?
That'd be a good option.
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortages, we just don't
I would
have
like to
enough
homeschool
resources
children.
going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's 5,000 or 6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarship types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy is growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state Capitol ground.
Okay, so if you want to know way more about what happened on January 6th, more than anyone else, I would go to my Rumble channel, Don189, and take a look at that. I have footage that like barely anyone has that I've shared. And you're not going to get it on YouTube again. Those were deleted decades ago, well, ages ago. And also, I also have footage of Ashley Babbitt and that whole situation that, again, like not a lot of people acknowledge, know of, or looking into, including in the Truther community. And I know this is a touchy subject, but I have the crisis actors. I have a government plants. I have like even the Ray Epps footage, like that even from the night before, and all of it. Take a look at that. You've got literally like from inside the Capitol, from all of it.
In St. Paul, and said we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election.
He is insane. Oh my God. Oh my God. Does he not know what really happened on January 6th yet? Why do they keep on talking about this? Like they keep talking about it. More people are going to investigate it. More people are going to look into it. And then we're going to see how much of a lie it was.
Election and the peaceful.
Even with the pipe bomb, like even Dan Bongino recently shared that. I shared that like a long time ago, repeatedly. Like people need to look into this more. Don't take my word for it. Look at the videos I share. Look at the information that I'm sharing.
Transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later.
Oh my God.
In the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
The governor does have the floor.
Sorry. Firing in a crowded theater. If he's I don't know if he's referring to Abraham Lincoln, but the day that the Secret Service was created was the day he was shot, and maybe that was a form of censorship as well.
Fire in a crowded theater, that is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah, well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this, I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is,
you know what? I was gonna. This debate is long, but I do like sharing my points on that. I do think that the election was rigged, and that propagandists and media and other politicians had a lot to do with it. Hunter Biden's laptop had gotten released because that was the truth, and there was a lot of stuff in there that was damning for the entire Biden family. I don't necessarily think that people would have voted for him. That was all suppressed. Even Facebook was suppressing this information. There was Russian propaganda that Hillary Clinton actually enacted. Like, she was directly involved in this propaganda, the PSYOPs campaign that was revolving Russia propaganda, and implicated Trump in this, and all of this stuff. And so that also, if that came out. And again, people like Mark Zuckerberg even admitted this publicly. So he's also saying that he censored this information or downgraded it. All of this information was suppressed, and that would have definitely, I think, impacted the results. And then there was also questionable ballots and spikes in the numbers in certain key states. And so these are things that need to be looked into as well, because I think that those would have absolutely altered the election.
Where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates, the CBS News Vice Presidential.
Okay, is it coming back?
Welcome back to CBS News Vice Presidential Debate.
Very fast. Okay.
It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people.
Oh my God.
They believe in a positive future of this country, and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage. And then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone,
very important,
join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with Kamala because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you and good night.
CBS News. So much propaganda. I know this is a long video, like I said, but once this video is finished, anyone that watches later will be able to fast forward into the interesting parts, because I do want to talk about Hurricane Helene, or Helene, however you want to pronounce it. Because for me, if I waited another day or 2 days or 3 days to share this information, I already feel like it's too late, right? So at least, even though these videos are long, they are jam-packed with information I think is very useful to get in a timely manner.
I hope Benjamin Netanyahu burns in hell. I hope him and his generals and the far-right government in Israel burn in hell.
Well,
we are looking for babies, but there is no babies left. Maybe I killed a girl, she was 12, but they're looking for a baby.
We'll do whatever we need to do to defend ourselves.
An investigation is underway into whether Israeli forces blowing up the main drinking water reservoir in Rafah constitutes as a war crime.
I will say that I can't give you any trigger warnings because I haven't watched this specific video. This is another reaction video from the Stu Peters Network. And I will say that I don't agree with everything that he shares either. But sometimes he shares really interesting, compelling information.
Not tell me to ever feel comfortable with 18,000 children being ruthlessly murdered.
Let me hear you cheer if you support Israel.
The Jews are everywhere. All the assistants of Trump, Jews. All the assistants of Sleepy Joe, Jews. Obama, Jews. Everyone around there, Reform Jews, Conservative Jews, Chabadnik, this.
Today, the Jews rule this world by proxy. They get others to fight and die for them.
Everyone who dares uttering a word of criticism against Israel is accused of anti-Semitism.
I will say that I don't think that this is a Jewish problem. And I know people are like, again, this is another thing that is so divisive in this community, because I don't believe that people that would commit these acts and implement the policies and the laws and the rules that support and enable things like human trafficking, drug trafficking, arms dealers, wars and experiments being done on women and children and all human beings and animals and all this stuff. I don't believe it's anyone that is truly a spiritual or a religious person, because then you would be accessing your higher levels of emotion, higher levels of consciousness, and you would be attuned to the reality of the world, and you wouldn't be doing this stuff, right? It would be against your moral codes, and you'd be the one that would be speaking out on this stuff, right? And so there are people that do get blamed because it's easy, right? Like target a specific group, even though there are many people within that group, right, that are speaking out on this stuff as well, and calling it out, and again are just people that are following a specific religion, and they're not people that support human genocide and all this stuff. So anyways, I think it's people that are just living really perverted, radical lifestyles with entitlement and varying degrees of, narcissism and sociopathic and psychopathic tendencies. And I think this is, again, like I've said, generational, and these people have been getting away with it for many, many years. So they feel, so there's also that feeling of invincibility and superiority and elitism that comes with it, right? And they don't care about societal outcomes at all in specific groups. So even Satanists, people are also blaming the Satanists because of their 4 codes, right? And they think that these people are likely devil worshippers, but they Satanists, it's way more than that, right? And I believe that their code has to do with self-preservation, and so for them it's themselves and people within their groups, right? So a lot of royal groups fall into that category. And people that are in the billionaire club, people that own like the oil industry, like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, BlackRock, Vanguard, General Dynamics, Bell, all of these groups, right? The higher ups would be protecting their own in order to maintain the wealth that they're taking, right, at the expense of others. They don't care about societal outcome, like I've said, and that includes human beings and animals and trees, etc. Social Darwinism. And there's no right and wrong, and then eugenics. So, and then there's people where their gods are money, right? And there's people that are perverted, like even sexual predators, and they are again like involved and complicit in a lot of these crimes against humanity and on Earth, and exploiting our and resources and things like that as well. All over the world. It's all over the world. It's in China, it's in North Korea, it's in the Philippines, it's in Taiwan, it's in so many island nations. It's Africa. Yeah.
When I was very young, I was forced to participate in that, in which I had to sacrifice an infant.
And the purpose of sacrifice is to what? Is to bring you what? What are you sacrificing for?
For power.
Uh-huh. Power.
I do agree that people should be investigated, and their ties to other countries where there's possible bias, and where you're again like you don't have like that national pride or that national interest, which is also a threat to the country. And so of course, and if it just turns out internationally to be like a very specific group, then of course it is what it is. But I'm saying that there's people that are not Jewish that are also supporting and enabling and directly involved in a lot of the human trafficking stuff, the drug trafficking stuff, the arms dealers, etc. So there's just like a lot of groups involved that I don't think are, anyways, religious at all or spiritual.
All the mainstream rags, the Rolling Stone, the New York Times, the Daily Beast, Right Wing Watch, Media Matters are all saying Stu Peters is about to release a series of anti-Semitic tropes. If you rewind that and you take a look at it, there was no subjective commentary in that.
But I mean, is like, and this is where I'm just gonna like, is the monarchy Jewish? Is the, I mean, yes, there are people within, but they're also largely like there's like the Catholics, and is Xi Jinping, is Kim Jong Un, is anyways, just but again, you're right. There is an overrepresentation in various countries that do impact us more personally and intimately. So I will, again, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that what we're doing is it's causing animosity and division and hatred towards people that are not guilty of these crimes against humanity. This group that you're talking about that's overrepresented in various positions, these are people that are part of the millionaire billionaire club, and are the lobbyists, propagandists that are hired and intentionally put into those positions as a diversion, distraction, a target. And but it's also like again to control where the money's going, and it's largely going to Anyways, lots of different countries, but it's not even going to the countries. It's going to like the people that are taking the money and only giving a small percentage of it to the actual like military complex, like the people on the ground.
That teaser for our upcoming film Occupied, which will air exclusively at stupeters.com this fall, working on an official release date now. If you want early access to that film, head on over to stupeters.com. Click on the Stu Crew button. $1 for your first month. If you want to support us, keep us independent, knowing that we do not have the BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street funding that the Fox News Channel and all of these other big platforms have. We haven't done a deal with the devil. We said nothing. These people speak for themselves. They tell you exactly what it is that they're doing. And I don't really care whose feelings it hurts. Your feelings, you should feel a certain type of way when you watch those people talk like that because they're coming for your kids. So again, head on over to stupeters.com, or you can go to our Rumble channel if you're viewing it on Rumble right now. And right here in the upper right-hand corner, there is something called Stu Crew. You can help us to stay independent and keep us supported. All kinds of distractions happening right now. Nobody wants you to know that the federal government is involved with destroying hundreds of so-called red counties, if you still believe in the left-right paradigm. And so in the wake of Hurricane Helene, over 130 American citizens are dead. Hundreds more are still missing. Billions of dollars worth of property and infrastructure have been completely destroyed. Towns have been completely washed away. People have lost their homes, their vehicles, all of their earthly possessions just wiped away and gone. There was nothing in this storm's path that didn't get hit and hit hard.
Crazy.
And in many of these areas that have been affected, they're still not out of the woods. Water is still rolling down from the mountains, hitting rivers and streams, making the flood rise even higher, destroying even more property. It's an absolute disaster. And when you rattle off the names of the states that have been affected, it's easy not to realize just how huge of an area this is and how much destruction there's really been. This has to have happened on a massive scale. People are dead all the way from Florida to Virginia. Millions of people are still without power and will be for quite some time. And remnants of this storm are still dumping rain right now. Floods are now being reported as far north as Ohio. And all of this pain and all of this suffering is taking place over roughly 1/4 of the continental United States. The Biden-Harris regime, as one could expect, is doing absolutely nothing to help. In fact, Joe Biden is out telling the American people that there will be no more aid sent to Hurricane Helene victims. Whatever has already been allocated, that's all they're going to get. Because this disgusting occupied federal government.
I think before investigating religious groups, I would follow the money. That's yeah.
Is too busy sending our tax dollars to Ukraine and to Israel. So when it comes to saving and restoring our own communities and our own citizens, there's just not enough money to go around. And Joe Biden let this slip when he was talking to the media this week. So now he's opened his mouth. The government has had to spring into action and release a bunch of statements telling everyone that they're doing all that they can. But you know what? It's too late. The people on the ground know that the feds aren't coming to save them. And Joe Biden has confirmed it.
My FEMA advisor is on the ground in Florida right now. There's a distinction between the numbers that FEMA's used and the ones that are used by the locals. So it really is amazing. You saw the photographs. It's stunning. It's unbelievable. It really is.
Such a wide area.
And we've given them all everything that we have. We're on the ground ahead of time. So we're working hard.
Are there any more resources the federal government could be giving them?
No, we've given them, we have pre-planned a significant amount of it, even though they didn't ask for it yet. Hadn't asked for it yet.
So there he is. On camera, on tape, straight up telling reporters there is no more money for Hurricane Helene victims. Billions of dollars approved to go to Israel, billions of dollars approved to go to Ukraine, hundreds of millions of dollars going to Taiwan. But right here at home, where Americans' lives are being completely destroyed, there's Joe Biden, the illegitimate, pedophilic commander-in-chief, telling you that's it. So now for millions of hurricane victims, they're going to have to rely on themselves. and the goodwill of others to recover from this, because their own government, once again, has sold them out. But, you know, there's so much more at play here than this lackluster, at best, federal response, because as we've gotten a few days out from this storm, information has already started making its way around the internet. We're very quickly seeing that nothing adds up here. You know, when the storm was first making landfall, I had a viral post on X, which was then picked up by the corporate media, who wanted to call me a conspiracy theorist because the Weather Channel on their own radar showed the hurricane just materializing out of thin air. It showed up out of nowhere. I personally screen recorded this before posting it to X. So as if a full-sized Category 4 hurricane just rose up from hell or from the ocean and just showed up on radar barreling toward the southeastern United States. No buildup. No endless news segments on the next great hurricane about to make landfall. No. Just nothing. Just a hurricane popping up in the Gulf of Mexico and hammering a bunch of red counties in battleground states a month before the presidential election. So from the moment that this storm made landfall, actually from before it even made landfall, we've known something isn't right. And now that we've had a few days to investigate, and some of the foremost weather manipulation experts in the world have had a chance to take a look at this, my suspicions and the suspicions of many of you in our audience have been confirmed. This storm, at the very least, was being guided by man. This was a man-made disaster that was rained down on the heads of American citizens with planning, with forethought, intentionally, on purpose. All the proof is out there for the world to see. But you have to know what you're looking at first. And that's why the video that I'm about to show you is so important, because it shows radar evidence that networks of ground-based frequency transmitters were actually used to steer the storm. The storm was guided right into Florida and up the East Coast with deadly results.
Was Hurricane Helene's path and behavior just the result of natural processes and climate patterns, or was it manipulated? The circular blue flashes seen in this video are frequency transmissions from the NexRad network of transmitter installations. All available science evidence makes clear that atmospheric frequency transmissions can and do have a repelling effect on air masses, especially if and when the air masses have been seeded with electrically conductive nanoparticles. The brighter the blue flash from a frequency transmission installation, the more pronounced and powerful the repelling effect on any air mass or storm in the vicinity will be. Where there are no blue flashes, there is no transmission, thus no repelling effect, thus no resistance for a migrating storm. Translation: a migrating storm will be hindered from moving toward frequency transmissions and will easily migrate in a direction with no transmissions. So again, I ask, was Hurricane Helene's path and behavior just an act of nature, or was it engineered? You decide.
So the man behind that film is Dane Wigington, one of the world's foremost experts on weather, who joins us now. You have studied and become an expert on weather manipulation and geoengineering. At this point, how can anybody deny, Dane, that this was at very minimum steered in its direction by man?
There's absolutely no debate, rational debate about that, Stu. And then before I launch into climate engineering, I want to back up and say the trailer for your upcoming film is brilliant. Thank you for your courage in facing the truth head on. And this is one of those truths as well. Same ultimate cores of power behind both atrocities. So in the case of Hurricane Helene, again, we have definitive proof it's being manipulated. And when you ask how people can deny it, and I agree with your sense of angst about that. There is no rational denial, but we live in a society that's in too many ways not rational. Same with the aerosol dispersions in our skies, Stu. We have up-close film footage of these aircraft, KC-10s, KC-135, C-17, nozzles visible, turning dispersions on and off. We've taken a NOAA flying lab to altitude to test for these dispersions, all on film, all on the record in our groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which is now over 25 million views. So these storms, like Helene, that was seeded certainly as it made landfall. And you're correct about this immediate. Now we are told it's rapid intensification. We hear that term all the time now. It's like Hurricane Otis last October, the rapid intensification that took Hurricane Otis that slaughtered Acapulco. Acapulco will never recover. Hurricane Otis went from a non-significant tropical depression to the strongest Cat 5 hurricane to ever hit that part of the world in less than 24 hours. So when they can manipulate atmospheric pressure zones, they can increase convection and pump these storms up at will. And that's exactly what they're doing, Stu.
Can they create them out of a whole cloth?
If you can manipulate atmospheric pressure zones, you can create the conditions necessary for spawning these storms. What we see is that they're kept weaker until they're close enough to the ground-based frequency transmission network to more easily steer them. We have ocean-based transmitters as well. It's called SBX radar. Looks like a giant golf ball on top of an oil derrick. We have ship-mounted units as well. So again, but once a storm is spun up to full strength, it makes it harder for the weather controllers to manipulate that storm. So what we've typically seen recently in recent years, they'll keep that storm somewhat knocked down until it's close enough to land to manipulate it with the much more powerful, much more extensive ground-based network.
Are there either military or government agencies that actually admit to all of this? Is this documented anywhere where the people like NBC News who were in my inbox asking for me to explain my conspiracy theory views regarding weather manipulation so that there would be just no argument?
Well, first, let's start with that term. I mean, at this point, the conspiracy theorist term is the final fallback for the factless and the fearful, isn't it? I mean, that term is a badge of dishonor at this point. Bottom line is no agency is going to admit to this. Very bad career decision at minimum. I've had a NOAA scientist, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, state to my face, we all know this is going on. We don't know what to do. We have no First Amendment protection. So let's go back to the illegal federal gag orders, Stu, on all National Weather Service and all NOAA employees, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Why in the world would our government feel the need to gag the weathermen if there wasn't something very, very big to hide?
Well, yeah, I mean, there would be no reason for that. But is there documented admissions, I guess, from our fake government, murderous corporate crime syndicate, that they're actually doing this, that there's patents for this, that they're carrying this out, that there are methods for this, that there are tactics for this?
Well, this is the king has no clothes moment. I mean, we have up-close film footage. We have government documents, some 800 pages long, outlining the scope and scale of these operations going back decades. In fact, calling for the specific intergovernmental cooperation, even between
Was
quote,
Hurricane Helene's
adversarial
path?
nations.
Go ahead. I'm sorry about that.
That's right. Otherwise adversarial nations like China, Russia, U.S. cooperating and colluding on these programs. In fact, we know we have historical data to prove that Soviet weather modification scientists were touring the U.S. weather modification facilities during the height of the Cold War in the 60s. So for those that want to deny that these operations are going on, that is simply a form of unwillingness to face the reality. And in regard to the catastrophes too, Stu, I want to mention, we see the deluges that make all the headlines, but there's a slow unfolding cataclysm happening in the U.S. West where they are virtually cutting off our precipitation. We're 6 months now in Northern California, formerly lush forest in Northern California now, about 6 months with no rain. All the trees are dying. So again, they control the spigot, period. We can speculate about agendas and objectives, but the fact that the weather makers are absolutely controlling the flow of moisture, where it rains, where it doesn't, how toxic that rain is, that's beyond debate.
At Dane Wigington, there it is, geoengineeringwatch.org. You can go and watch this video. You can send it to whomever you'd like to. Send it to that freak show over at NBC News that wants to try to discredit everybody who can actually see with their own eyes. The emperor with no clothes right here. There's no way to deny, there's no rational or reasonable argument that this was just a natural course for this storm. Also take into consideration, by the way, watching The Dimming, which you can find at geoengineeringwatch.org, so you can learn more about all of this. This stuff that they talk about when they're speaking about climate change or global warming, which obviously global warming is no more because they had to switch it to climate change, Dane. All of this stuff is man-made, but it's by the enemy of the people, where they project and make you feel like it's you that's contributing to this warming.
What we would argue and what we would hope, the mantra that is taken up by all sides of the fence, is there can be no legitimate discussion about climate anything. You're completely correct on that, that our first focus must be climate engineering. There's no legitimate discussion about climate anything from any perspective about first and foremost addressing climate engineering. And Stu, elected officials are waking up. I just got off a call from Congressman from Carolina, and I'm joining a conference call with many congressmen this afternoon. They are waking up to this issue. We are shipping Geoengineering Watch printed materials to them. We're non-political. We don't advertise. Our printed materials are the most profound key to the door. We're supplying that to U.S. congressmen now that are waking up to this issue. So what I would argue is this, Stu, that as the magnitude of what's happening in our skies begins to unfold, and it's not just weather warfare, it's also biological warfare, because these elements are toxic: aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, polymer fibers, graphene. And we're inhaling all of this. And in fact, and two of those elements, Stu, we know are used for biological carrier platforms, polymer fibers, which are showing up everywhere and everyone, by the way, including brains, human organs, lots of recent studies on that. But those two elements, graphene and polymer fibers, are also used, again, biological carrier platforms to carry a pathogen from the clouds to the ground. What's that doing in our rain? And how big of cards are those in power prepared to play when people like you are shining the light on what they're doing, not just in our skies, but what's happening in the Middle East, the chaos, the carnage, the genocide.
Sorry, it just froze a bit. Anyway, enough of that. Possible weather modification, geoengineering, not helping out people that they need to be helping. There needs to be more helicopters. I was tracking a bit of it yesterday, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, please do. But civilians volunteering helicopters and other assets in order to get people out of areas. Not a lot of state intervention or assistance, or at the federal level. And that was spoken about, and even truck drivers getting there with an ice pick, getting their tires slashed en route to offer assistance, and it's shocking that the lack of assistance, and allegedly FEMA is not there yet. They could be there today. I don't know, because again, this was yesterday and through the night that I was looking at this stuff, but it's to be expected. No one's going to help us in the immediate future if there's any form of natural and man-made disaster.
You know, I just don't find it impressive whenever.
This is shifting gears because I like to, and it's already a long video, so again, it is what it is. It's from Jeranism. I'm going to like it even though I haven't seen it yet, but it's 20 questions flat earthers can answer, and it's only 11 minutes long, so I might as well throw in a twist at the end.
For anybody is out proving the globe, which has already technically been proven. It's the going belief, it's the going truth, it's the going fact. So I find it more impressive when people are out there trying to debunk the going truth. That's how you get closer to the truth. You don't get closer by doing the exact experiments that have been written in books for you to do, following certain parameters and calling certain things refraction and calling certain things. Whenever you've been given all these answers, of course you're going to come to those conclusions. You really need to step outside the box and check, is there a possible deception here? And when it comes to the flat earth, the answer is a resounding yes. It doesn't matter what space does. You have an army of trolls coming to make excuses for why they don't show cameras, or why they don't have adjustable or automatic camera focus on these cameras in space, and why they don't have a 24/7 footage, and why they've never gone back to the moon, and why we lost the tapes. Imagine we lost the tapes of the greatest enterprise, the greatest thing humans have ever done, and people make excuses for it. Well, they got a lot of tapes, it's real difficult to keep track of all those. And I could see them, it's 13,000 tapes and 700 boxes that are just lost. It's just ridiculous. Why would anybody make an excuse for them? It's just ridiculous.
20 questions that flat earthers can't answer.
As a child, I attended a show where a magician sawed a woman in half. Not knowing how this mechanism worked, I leapt to the conclusion that it had to be some kind of spiritual, mystical force of magic. It was a false conclusion that intuitively seemed correct, but brought with it a host of other problems, assumptions, and unanswered questions. If you lack scientific literacy, it's easy to postulate far-fetched alternative explanations for how the universe works. They seem intuitive, but as with the magician, they bring with them a host of other problems, contradictions, assumptions, and unanswered questions. Maybe you've seen a flat earth conspiracy video or read a compelling anti-science blog post, but before you dive headfirst into that flat world of absurdism, with the help of several other pro-science skeptically minded content creators, I've put together a list of questions for you to think about.
My question is this, to those who expect to see some kind of curvature on a globular earth with their eyes, what exact kind of goes away from us and over the horizon? Then that would be indiscernible. It would look the same as a flat earth because you can't see things that are under the horizon. If you're talking about a kind of curvature where if you were to follow the horizon from left to right, you would see some kind of curvature downwards. Just follow that to its logical conclusion. Do a 360 spin on the spot. Where does that horizon end up? It wouldn't match up to where you started, so that makes no sense whatsoever either. Even if you were high enough up to see some...
I'm just shifting gears here for a second. This is to Tony Coriolis. I would rather I give to a lot of charities. I've given like probably over 100,000. The ones that are actually doing on the ground work, right? Where I'm even getting like the list of like materials that are the charities, like and not for profits and people that are actually doing good work, not like people that are the sinister types in the Red Cross and the UN and these other organizations that are just taking a lot of the money and going with it. And so I would like to donate if you're actually offering assistance on the ground for any of the flood victims. I would absolutely like to give my. And so if you have some kind of a GoFundMe, or if I can donate on your channel, I don't know if I can do that, but if you could just like just send a message or something like that, I would definitely contribute.
Some kind of curvature, all it would be is looking down and seeing the entire Earth beneath you, and any globe from one particular point of view, because of perspective, is indistinguishable from a flat disk. In other words, nobody has ever claimed that the kind of curvature you're expecting to see is what you would expect to see on a globular Earth, or even that it's possible. Although I will say that it's a damn sight more possible than a flat Earth.
Oh, look at this curvature of the Earth. Oh my goodness. What was that you said, Alex? That nobody has ever made this claim? I don't think so, Alex.
And I just thought the part, the scientific mindset, and you might be fooled by a magician, which is true. And what happens if you have a scientific mindset is you fail to realize that the people who taught the mathematics work out, and you go around telling everybody that it's true. And yet, basically, of every astrophysicist there's ever been, how many of them have been to space?
You know what? Okay, so I was wrong in the timing, but Flattoberfest? That's very interesting. An area that was impacted. And wasn't there like a big hurricane for the Anarchapulco this year as well?
Zero. Maybe one, maybe two. So you're talking about people falling for things and falling for tricks. I mean, you believe that mathematics proves reality, that nobody's measured the distance to the sun, nobody's measured the size of Saturn. You just believe because mathematically it works out that it must be true. And again, you can mathematically show anything on paper and it could be completely false. You could show a whole city and how it mathematically lays out and how many square miles it is and who owns what property. And it could all be completely and totally fake. So just saying.
If you honestly want to believe that the Earth is flat, I'm not going to stop you, but I would like to ask, if you want to convince any of us, especially those of us that are at least moderately science-minded, could you please provide a working model?
Have a model. If you don't have a model, lack of a model.
A full-scale working model of the flat Earth.
You have no model, you have no facts, you have no evidence, but
with accurate predictions and measurements that follow through on that scale. And no, I don't mean the UN map.
It's just frustrating because you hear things like this and it's, again, they don't understand that if there was a bunch of people who believed in a flat Earth and they made observations of the sky, they could easily have predictions for every eclipse and every astronomical event. And then here comes Newton and his crew and they start promoting the ball Earth and everything else. Well, then you've got now these observations being placed onto a ball And then you've got these guys saying, oh, you need to come up with the observations are the observations, which is why they have to have that one guy from NASA who does all their eclipse data, because they have to go back to before when people were flat earthers to pull that data. It's like people don't realize that every single discovery, every expedition, every map, every mission, everything that was ever done of any substance, really, any discovery or land survey has all been done by the government. So why would they think that a bunch of flat earthers could get together and do what the governments took years and years to do? I mean, just to map coastlines and just to send people down to the Southern Ocean took years and hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars at that time, which would be billions today. So how could you expect us to do anything close to that? Our goal is not to do that. Our goal is to get enough people on Earth to realize they've been lied to, at which point they will force their governments who are using our money to do these expeditions again and to fix what they effed up. And so I recognize that mathematics is not proof of anything, and that
and just talking about models, I just wanted to present models from the past. I've shared this before, but if you look at the Greek model, the Navajo, Babylonian, Mesa, Japanese, Persian, Viking, Indian, Mayan, look at NASA. It's not remotely similar to advanced civilizations from the past. Incan, Hebrew, Chinese, Celtic, Sumerian, African, Slavic, Masonic, Islamic, Roman, Egyptian, Chumash, Australian. I don't know if I mentioned these before, but again, very similar, that this is some kind of a contained environment, and that the Earth plane itself is projected on a flat plane of inertia. And I believe these to be toroidal fields that contain this environment, electromagnetism being involved, that influence light at various temperatures, pressures, and densities. And water needs a container, and it shows it here as well, right? And all of these, some kind of a container and like some kind of a flat plane underneath, with Sheol or whatever you want to call it underneath the terrestrial areas. And petroleum being the second most abundant fluid in the world. But I mean, just look, guys and girls, come on. And then there's NASA.
Look into those things and find out how they got those answers, and they'd never got them. They simply were mathematic equations, and somebody told somebody, here, go get this result out of a test with light, and here, go get this result out of your shed, Cavendish, and Foucault, go do this. And that's all that they did. And it's simply not proof of anything. You can't just take the little lights in front of the sun and say, okay, well, we know now at this angle that, no, you have to have something that's concrete first, and they don't have any of that. So you don't know those. Just like I say, I don't know, you don't know either. And it is the science backers and these guys that are making the claim that they do know. They know how far the moon is. They know what the sun is made of. They know that it's been burning, helium or hydrogen into helium for millions of years. I mean, it's just nonsense. To believe that stuff is really just giving up your brain to somebody else.
Why is it that all other astronomical bodies, like other planets, their orbiting moons, the sun, other stars, why is it that they're all spherical and the laws of gravity apply to them, but the Earth is somehow the odd one out? What makes it different?
You have to believe in neutron stars, and then you have to give the values for them, like the fact that a teaspoon, so imagine a teaspoon like you're eating cereal or putting sugar in your coffee, a teaspoon of neutron star weighs 22 billion pounds. So if you can't come to the conclusion yourself that that's horseshit, then good luck to you. I mean, and every physicist believes that. So just because they all believe it doesn't make it true. It means it needs to be that in order for Newtonian gravity to work on the stuff that they want it to work for, because they need that kind of weight for a neutron star. It doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination that anything that's a spoonful can weigh 22 billion pounds. It's a joke. And really, when you dig down deep into these planets and their distances, it's all mathematics. It's all just a code. I mean, you could take the numbers 0, 3, 6, or then start doubling the numbers. So 0, then 3, 6, 12, 24, 56. Go from there. And each one, you can add 4 to that number. So 0 would become 4, 3 would become 7, 6 would become 10, and then divide by 10, and you get the astronomical distance to every planet. So the 4 becomes 0.4, which is Mercury. Then you get 7, which becomes 0.7, that's Venus. Then you get 10 becomes 1.0, that's the Earth. Then you get 1.6, that's Mars. Then you get 28, which is Ceres, 2.8. Then you get 5.6 for Jupiter. So it's all just a mathematic code that they use to, it's not what you think it is. And that's, I don't know how you get that through to people, that just because somebody told you about the galaxies and about these planets and what they do and how far how far away they are, doesn't make it true. It makes it a good story, well put together. But I was looking to spherical aberration. I was looking through my telescope and the eyepiece fell off. And when I picked it up and looked at it and looked out at the street, it makes things spherical. And I said, what is this all about? And I looked it up and found out it's because they say the light that's coming into my telescope is distorted. So then the eyepiece is supposed to bend it back to real for me. Well, if you believe that that's good for you, I didn't want it anymore. I gave my telescope away. I don't want something that is not bringing in the light correctly, and then they have to put an eyepiece on it that's going to recorrect it for me before it gets to my eye, because who's to say I should believe that? So, you can believe you see spheres in the sky. I've never seen them, with the exception of Jupiter, which I see moons that seem to go around. But again, I'm saying that they're moons. They're little lights that go around a little other light. That's all I see.
If NASA's part of a global conspiracy, the Earth's flat, and the moon landings never happened, then how come anybody with a high-powered laser can bounce light off of retroreflectors that the astronauts left on the moon?
Well, in the 2.5 seconds it would take for that light to come back, if you're spinning 1,000 miles per hour, you've already moved almost a mile. I think it's like 4,000 feet, just in the 2 seconds it takes for that light to come back. So how are you hitting your moving target and deciding exactly where on the Earth you are, so you're moving at a different speed? It's just all nonsense. And again, Bob's right. 1962 they did it. So why would people keep using that as a proof that we went to the moon? It's the dumbest explanation I've ever heard. When right in Wikipedia it tells you that the first measurements bounced off the moon were in 62. So it's just crazy. And again, talking about remote control at a distance, that they're controlling these robots on Mars or on the moon from Earth in 1970 is crazy. I mean, you need to go back and look at what kind of power and technology they had then. And, it's hard for us to realize it now, but they had the power of a Game Boy that they said got them to the moon and back. It's just impossible.
All right, that was great. Long video. Apologies for that. So on that note, I will leave it at that. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.